so in this moment of newness, I am relying upon grace for this spiritual thought. Because as I kept thinking about it, I go, grace has to be spontaneous. It has to be in the moment. It can't be anything but in the moment. A couple of expressions came up for me on the way here, and one of them was, my father used to tell me when we would be driving up to the mountains and I would feel like we were going downhill. He'd go, no, we're still going uphill. And I'm going, but the car feels like it's rolling downhill right now. He says, no, we're still going uphill. And he would break my brain like this when, as a child, all the time. But we were still moving forward. And forward was upward because of our direction. And in that metaphor, grace is always moving us forward and upward. And I'm grateful for that. I'm also feeling this morning that the grace is also a feeling of expectancy and gratitude at the same time. Not separate from each other, just kind of like a union. A union of knowing that there is always that something that is being birthed from us, through us, in us, as us. And it is worthy of our gratitude. Whether it's a thimbleful or a whole ocean. For grace, I'm grateful, and so it is. This morning I want to tell you something a little astrological about myself. I have a Pisces moon. I don't know whether...
Me too.
Do you? Okay, good. She'll understand perhaps. But for those of you who are astrology students, you may understand that to some degree. And I say to some degree because an astrological chart is as individualized as our thumbprints. We are all a very, very special blend of spirit. And for those of you who are not astrology students and don't give a whip, the idea that I wanted to present to you today was to help you understand how my mind works in a very simple way. So the iconic idea of Pisces is there's two fish swimming in opposite directions, right? So when I was thinking about forgiveness, I either have to ask forgiveness for a transgression or something that I've done that I feel it's not clean. It's just maybe that I said something that someone took offense to or whatever, and I feel I need to clean it up. Or I feel I need to forgive a person, place, or thing. But that really bugs me very deeply. So this is where the fish comes in. On one fish, one hand, I say, you did something to me that I didn't ask for, therefore I hold a grudge and I need to forgive you for that transgression. But here comes the other fish swimming in saying, who am I that I am so high and mighty that I judge you to be wrong in your actions? And because I deem them bad, abusive, thieving, slanderous, or whatever, the high and mighty me gets to be better than you. And that's also what also occurs to me is that I don't understand, because I haven't walked in someone else's shoes, what their past is, what their history is, where they're broken. I don't have that information, so I evaluate and judge however they behave according to my experience. And that is only a tiny part of the story. So here comes another fish. So if I need to forgive you, then doesn't that mean I'm in judgment, which is something that I'm going to pay for later. That's something that I don't necessarily want to have come back at me if I practice the golden rule, which I definitely do, to the best of my ability. So then the question comes, so who died and made me God? Am I not grateful that God loves me in spite of my frailties, my insecurities, my mistakes, my immaturity, my selfishness? Hell yes. I'm so grateful that God overlooks my shadow side. But it's not even that. God doesn't see any imperfections in me at all. Even Jesus, when he was on the cross, said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He didn't say, I'm never going to forgive you guys for nailing me to this piece of crab wood. The dictionary says that to forgive means to give as before. So when you meet a new friend, a new lover, you've got a new job, and it's wonderful, and you're so happy, and you're in that honeymoon stage, and everything appears to be perfect until you see where they're broken. You see their pain body, as Eckhart Tolle talks about. Then the feathers fly. So I think to myself, maybe my need for forgiveness is really to myself. To treat myself as I have noticed before I had flaws? Impossible. So I have to turn that over to God. I have to trust that I'm okay. I'm doing my best, and I try to staff my case, but some days that I judged, misunderstood, projected my stuff onto somebody else or other situation, I've separated and I'm not practicing religious science. I am flawed, or so it appears, imperfect, but that's judgment on my part. In my Father's eyes, His plan for me is right where I am. I am in perfect right action right where I am, regardless of what the appearance of the things are that's going on. I think this is for us, whatever is going on outside in this crazy world that we're living in. And we need to continue to have the shadow mule, that's a new term I came up with this morning, a shadow mule kicking us in the hindquarters to keep us moving forward in consciousness, to keep us moving upward as we approach God realization. So Joel Goldsmith in the Art of Spiritual Healing says, knock and the door will be opened. That's Matthew 7:7. And he says that door is our consciousness. And we need to realize who we've always been. When in my case another fish shows up to ask me another dumb question, my present consciousness reminds me, and the work that I've done reminds me to stay humble, to stay in gratitude. It helps me resolve what I really don't want to be and what I think I see. If there is only God, as our beloved Angelo told me a few weeks ago, if there is only God, then there's only God. There's not God and somebody else or something else. So how do we reconcile our differences with God? Are we ashamed of our nakedness or our flaws in front of our Father? Doesn't that sound a little like Adam and Eve and Jehovah? And didn't Jesus, so far as we know, come to straighten that out? He came to tell us that we are prodigal sons. No matter how much we screw up, He's always going to love us. He's always going to give us the kingdom. And it also makes me suspicious. Here come what do you call it? A conspiracy theory that it was a hypnotic suggestion in the beginning, because that story is 8,000 plus years old, and maybe it was even a little propaganda by the early church to control the masses. We are the prodigal sons and daughters of God. We've been out of town and we've been out of our minds for quite a while now. So how do we get back home? Through God's grace. And I had to ask myself, I really wanted to speak about grace today, but I realized I don't really know what grace is. So I did some research, of course, and which is my MO. And one of the things that Joel Goldsmith said was, all that is necessary for harmony is God's grace realized. I know that God's grace is His love for us and for Him and for Himself and for all that is. And this gives me great comfort. Mir Baba in Listen to Humanity says, regardless of the material bindings of the good and the bad, spiritual freedom is always at hand, ready to be grasped by man. This is true because man's inherent spiritual freedom of soul is eternal, changeless, and infinite, regardless of whether it is experienced by a fully conscious person or not. And Ernest Holmes defines it as grace is, but we still need to accept it. We need to recognize it. It's not something God's imposed on it, it's something God blesses us with. But it is the logical result of correct alignment with life. and relationship to Spirit. We're saved by it to the extent that we believe in it, and we accept and seek to embody it in our own lives. Limitation is not a thing, but it is a belief. Freedom is a divine reality. I know that God's grace is, I can't define it like those masters do, but I can tell you that I can't define it, but I know when it comes. And I know that because it's incredibly soft and very quiet, and it's almost like if you hold up your hand and a hummingbird or a butterfly lands on your finger, or you can feel a soft summer breeze coming off of the ocean. It's that kind of love, it's that kind of gentleness, it's that kind of lack of domination or control or pushing of any kind. It is a gentle wrapping of its arms around me to remind me of who I am and how much I'm loved. In the Course in Miracles, he says, I live by grace, and by grace I am released. And I thought it might be fun if you guys would say that with me, just to have it settle in. So if you will repeat this, by grace I live, by grace I live, by grace I am released, by grace I am released, by grace I give, by grace I give, by grace I will release. By grace I will release. So our job is just to accept this loving, divine, gentle peace that's everywhere around us. And the only thing that's stopping us from fully embracing it, from fully realizing God in who we are and what it's all about, is our belief that's standing in our way. And I feel very, very grateful that we are religious scientists that are in here speaking about grace and how we deserve it, and how it is our divinity, it is our inheritance. When down the road they're talking about other scary, nasty things if you don't behave and if you sin and blah, 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 blah. I'd much rather be in here. And I'd much rather be able to, in my times of fear, in my times of not trusting, that I reach for grace as opposed to reaching for something that I don't understand, that I can't connect with. You know, and everything and everyone around me reminds me. There's little kittens who run up in my lap, and my dog looks at me with such loving eyes. And I see God in all those things, and the scent that flowers offer us in the springtime, and the leafing of the trees. And that is what God's gentle love showering over us is. Not some verbiage, not some intellectual, dominating, bullying type of superior being that sees me as all wrong, flawed, imperfect, never gonna make it to heaven kind of thing. But more of a, come on kid, if you can't walk along this beach, I'll carry you for a while. So I've learned a lot about grace in the last couple of hours, and I need to employ more of that into my life, and I think that in my scarier moments would give me greater peace and understanding as I walk along with you up this trail to God realization. Thank you.